My guest today is Jim Harshaw Jr., an NCAA Division I All-American athlete, internationally recognized TEDx speaker, and personal performance coach. He has impacted hundreds of thousands of lives across the world by helping clients and audiences increase resilience, maximize potential, and build high-performing teams. In today's episode, we talk about his coaching framework to help you maximize your potential. Welcome to Lifeology.
James, thanks for having me.
I am excited. I was looking at all your backstory. You've done so many wonderful things, but how I should say this, but you are a wrestler, an All-American wrestler. How did you use wrestling to become the person you are today?
You know, wrestling has given me so much. Like, it's opened so many doors for me in my life. And, you know, it was the failures that you go through as an athlete, the failures, the successes, the framework and infrastructure that you have in your life as an athlete has really informed, you know, not only who I am and how I operate my life, but even my coaching framework. But so I was a high school wrestler, then a college wrestler, and an All-American. Then I became a Division I head coach as well. So wrestling has been part of my life for a long, long time.
That's amazing. I was reading, I think it was 16 years into your career as a wrestler, and everything just changed for you because you had unfortunately had not won that final match. How was that for you to work so hard for something? And then, unfortunately, you didn't win that. How is it to sit in that locker room and experience those feelings?
Yeah, you know, it was my junior year in college, and you're right, it was the end of my 16th season of competition, and I'd never achieved any of my goals. Like, really, even in high school, I never achieved any of my goals. In high school, my goal was to be a state champion. I never even got onto the podium, let alone the top of the podium. But I got to college, and you know, my goal in college was to be an All-American. And to be honest, I didn't even really have that goal at the very beginning because I didn't even know if I belonged wrestling at the Division I level. And I was part of a top 10 recruiting class, top 10 in the country. But I was like the asterisk at the bottom. It probably would have been ranked higher if I wasn't in it, you know? But you know, I made the starting lineup as a freshman, which is a big deal for me. And then I qualified for the national championships, which is a huge deal. But to be an All-American, you have to win at least 4 matches at the national championships. You have to finish in the top 8 in the country to be considered an All-American, to be awarded the All-American sort of recognition. And my freshman year, I qualified for the national championships, but I failed. You know, my sophomore year, I qualified for the national championships, and I failed. Again, my junior year, you know, was pretty much a repeat of the prior 2 years. I qualified for the national championships, and I failed. And so, you know, this moment you referenced, like, I'm sitting in the locker room in tears, like with my face buried in a towel, thinking, like, what's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? Am I not smart enough? Am I not capable enough? Maybe it's just not in the cards for me. And I know a lot of your listeners are feeling that now or have felt that. Like, what is wrong with me? Like, why? I'm working so hard. I'm doing everything I can do. Why can't I get to that next level? And I had dedicated, James, my entire off season between my junior year and my senior year to figuring out what is it that I'm missing, because I was voted by my teammates for 3 consecutive years and my coaching staff the hardest worker on the team. I mean, I was showing up early, staying late, watching film, extra weightlifting sessions, you name it. I was doing the work. And I think a lot of folks who listen to this kind of podcast can understand that, right? You're grinding, you're working hard, but like, what's the missing piece? And for me, I set out that entire off season to figure out what that missing piece was. And I traveled around the country, and I was working as just a camp counselor at wrestling camps. And these camps would bring in like Olympic gold medalists and, you know, national champion and national championship coaches. And I would always find a way to like pick their brains and like, what am I, you know, do I need to, you know, do more strength training? Do I need to be more flexible? Do I need to learn new skills? And by the end of the summer, I realized like I never figured this out. And it was the night before the very first competition of my senior year, my last year of competition. And I'm sitting in the hotel room in Morgantown, West Virginia, at the West Virginia University Open. And it hit me. I never figured it out. Like, I never figured out the thing that I'm missing. And in that moment, James, I gave up. I gave up on the goal. And I said to myself, all I can do is all I can do. I can't do any more than I'm doing right. I can't like there's not enough hours in the day. I can't run more miles. I can't lift more weights. I can't watch more film. There's nothing else I can do. So all I'm going to do is do everything I possibly can. And then wherever the chips fall at the end of the season, that's where they're going to fall. Well, I didn't know it. And you know it as a psychotherapist, you understand this is you understand that you know, the outcome, like when you are so focused on that outcome and not the process, that fear of failure that I was feeling can often get in the way. Like, and I had that fear of failure, and I finally put that down. In that moment, I released the fear of failure. I realized in that moment that failure actually is an option, you know, despite what they say, whoever they are, right? Failure is not an option. Well, yes, it is an option. And I realized that, and I said, I'm okay with failure because I'm just going to go out and give it my best and do whatever I can. And so I did. The next morning I woke up and I won 5 straight matches. I won the championship at that tournament, and I went on and proceeded throughout the rest of the season, having the season of my life. And I had so much fun. And it all came down to, I got to the national championships again. I had won 3 matches. Now here I am, the 4th and final match. If I win this, I become an All-American. There's 15,000 people in the arena. And here I am. I'm ranked 11th in the country. And I got to wrestle the 4th ranked guy in the country who's on the number 1 ranked team in the country, University of Minnesota. And I, again, had to find a way to let go of my fear of failure, because literally 17 years of competing at that point now comes down to 7 minutes. And if I thought of it that way, I was never going to perform my best. So I had to push all of that, right? You know, and I had to push all of that away and literally just go out and just have as much fun as I could, throw caution to the wind, and give everything I possibly had within that 7 minutes. And at the end of the 7 minutes, I got my hand raised, and it was a transformative moment in my life, and I'm so grateful for it.
What's the same? What's different between the junior self and then the person who is standing on that podium? What's the different? What's the same?
It comes down to, you know, we've all heard or maybe read the book by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those concepts he talks about in there is starting with the end in mind. We have to start with the end in mind. And we all have that. You have it. I have it. The listener, you have it. We have that end in mind. And sometimes we get so fixated on that we focus on that. And there's this fear that drives us. What if I don't make the sale? What if this sales presentation doesn't go well? What if this conversation with my boss for this promotion that I'm trying to get, what if that doesn't go well? What if I fail in my performance, whatever that job interview, whatever it might be. But if we can let that go and just truly be, just be the fullest version of ourselves, then we are able to actually perform at our best. That's when our best performances come. And that's what the great champions, you know, I use sports as an analogy because that's my background, but that's also what we see played out in front of us all the time. Like the greatest champions, like they're able to do that. They're able to put away those fears and those doubts that we all have, by the way, and that's really the crux of my podcast is Success Through Failures, is revealing the failures and the doubts and the fears of these world-class performers. But that was the difference between my junior and my senior year. My junior year, James, I was afraid to fail. And I won a lot of matches. I was a good wrestler. I was one of the top wrestlers in the country, but I was afraid. I was afraid to fail. There was a target on my back. But once I released that and said, listen, failure is actually an option, it freed me up. It was so much fun.
This is an obvious response, but I do want to ask this because I want to make sure everyone understands your version of this, which is probably the same as everybody else. What is your definition of failure?
You know, I don't have a clear-cut definition of failure, but you know, so there's different ways people look at it, and you know, failure. You talk to some folks and they say, "I don't believe in failure. I don't believe." You know, there's winning and there's learning, right? There's no such thing as failure. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of semantics, right? It's like, listen, you know, I believe failure is actually a building block. I believe it's a good thing. Some people don't even believe in using the word failure, and that's great. That's fine. Like, however we talk about it, well, we're talking about the same thing as when you don't achieve that goal, what do we learn from it, right? And this is a thing that you know, in today's society, we kind of understand this. There's a lot of talk about this, right? I'm not the only person out there talking about the value of failure. We see quotes on social media and all that. And it's great. And for the parents listening, you tell your kids, hey, I know you failed, little Johnny, at the, and you struck out, but failure is okay. But when that happens to me, we internalize it.
That's not okay.
We go, ooh, failure stings. It hurts. Because of it, we lower our goals. We settle for less. We lower our expectations, and that leads to eventually us kind of lifting our head at some point in our lives and looking around, going, wait a second, I thought I'd be further along at this point. Yeah. And we don't understand it is these failures, this view of failure that we have when we make mistakes, when we trip up, and when we fail. There's this little voice inside of us that says, see, I told you so. I told you you weren't good enough. You weren't smart enough. You weren't capable enough. It's not in the cards for you. All those things that I was thinking, all those thoughts come back. So in terms of the definition of failure, failure is it's a building block for success. It is a necessary step on the path to success. I'm not saying we seek it out. I'm not saying we want it. I'm not saying we should fail and walk away whistling Dixie and smiling and thinking this is great. No, failure hurts. It sucks. It's not something we want.
Yeah.
It's just something that actually happens even to the top world-class performers.
Everybody has a form of emotional baggage, baggage in general. So that can be someone calls baggage being a divorced person or being a bankrupt person or whatever label they give themselves. Unfortunately, when we do that, we create an emotional snapshot of what we assign to that event. So in other words, if I consider myself a divorced person, if that is failure for me, or if I'm a bankrupt person or I'm a sick person, whatever label we use, we assign emotion to that event. And unfortunately, that event then becomes who we are, which then becomes the foundation for how we do something next. So for example, if I did something I consider failure, all of the emotion of that moment I've now assigned to that. So it's a huge amount of emotion that's assigned to that, which then I put on me, and that's what we call baggage, because I'm literally carrying it around with me. And so when people struggle with looking at one event and that defines them, we forget retrospectively. In other words, when we look at the past, if you wait a second longer, something builds off of that. My viewers and listeners always hear me say every event in our life is like a jigsaw puzzle piece. One jigsaw puzzle piece links with another one, which links to another one, which then creates the picture. There are many things in our life we know where like if we're doing a jigsaw puzzle, we know where the boundaries are, the corners. That makes sense. But some of those pieces just don't make sense. Like, where in the world is this going to go? And that's the same type of thing when it comes to failure or those situations. But if you wait a little bit longer, you see how it links to something else. Either a door opened for you, or an opportunity came about, or something happened. And so if we get stuck in that one moment of that jigsaw puzzle piece, for lack of better words, then unfortunately that is the failure. But bigger perspective allows for it to be a part of something as opposed to only being one thing.
Yeah. There's a great quote by Steve Jobs. He said, we can't connect the dots in our lives looking forward, only backward. When we look back, we can see that failure that, James, you've experienced, that I've experienced, again, for the listener, you've experienced these failures that we've experienced, we can look back and we can see the value from them, right? And listen, some of them were like, yeah, I still wish they didn't happen, but I guarantee you can look back on your life and go, I'm grateful for that failure. I'm grateful for that setback, because it has led to this new amazing thing. And it happens all the time with my coaching clients. I understand, they lose their job, or they get downsized, or something bad happens in their life. And I say, listen, just trust me. Like, I know it's gonna be hard to hear this, but good is going to come from this. And then, 6 months later, a year later, we're looking back and going, wow, look at, we hoped that something good would come from this. And look, it has. And so we really have to, it's easy to hear this on a podcast right now, right? You're on the treadmill. For the listener, you're on the treadmill or on your commute to work or on walking your dog or whatever, right? And you're listening to this, but can you actually internalize this? Can you actually take this with you so that tomorrow morning, when you get that email that you were dreading, or a week from now, that thing happens that you were hoping didn't happen, or you fail at that next thing, can you actually look at that and say, listen, I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what the next piece, how this piece of the jigsaw puzzle fits. I don't know, but I'm going to trust that it will fit well, and this will be an opportunity for me to grow. And if you can make the choice, like consciously at a conscious level, make the choice of saying those words, of believing those things and thinking those things, even though it's hard, even though it sucks, even though it hurts, even though you're embarrassed or whatever it might be, if you choose to think that, then good things will come from it.
Yes. I want to transition into your podcast. Why don't you tell us more about it?
Yeah. So success through failure. And, this was, I gave a TEDx talk titled Why I Teach My Children to Fail, which was really the genesis of the podcast. And it was largely about my career as a wrestler. And, it was failure through high school, failure through college until my senior season, when I finally figured out the mental part of this. But the podcast is really about interviewing, world-class performers, Tim Ferriss and Jack Canfield, Ken Blanchard, Shannon Miller, Olympic gold medalists. Like, I interview Navy SEALs and Olympic gold medalists and CEOs and New York Times bestselling authors. And we talk about not only their successes and their strategies for success, but also tell me about a time when you failed. And man, James, they reveal these failures that we don't see from the outside looking in. We just see them on the top of the on the top of the podium, right? But we don't see these failures along the way. And we just look at these people and we kind of go, oh, it was just easier for them. They had the degree or the connections or the charisma or the money or the whatever. But I don't have that. Woe is me. I can't get there. But I pull back the curtain and reveal that failure is just as big a part, oftentimes even bigger a part. And I'm not just saying that for hyperbole. This is the truth. When you look at these world-class performers, failure is an integral ingredient in their success. So that's what the whole podcast is about. It's really the only podcast that reveals the true nature of success.
Wow,
and I just published my 400th episode, by the way. So it's been around for quite a while.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great. Yes, I know how that is. That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm assuming you can listen to it on all podcasting platforms?
Every platform. It's out there everywhere. Yep.
Excellent. Okay, that's good to know. Because I wanted to transition into this about your show. With the people that are on there, what was, I mean, I'm sure there's many, but out of your 400 episodes, what was the one that stuck out to you the most?
I'll say Tim Ferriss, and not just because he's Tim Ferriss, right? Tim Ferriss, obviously a big name. But the interesting things that he revealed in that, so he shared a couple of points, and one of them was that failure in and of itself does not lead to success. Yeah, I mean, people, you've seen it. I've seen it. People go through their entire lives as failures. So failure is not the only ingredient for success. It's the learning from failure that comes from failure, right? So we have to actually hit the pause button, step back, and learn from that failure. And that's really the feedback loop that is necessary. And to step back even one more level from that conversation, to put that into sort of a larger picture of a framework, I mentioned earlier there's an infrastructure in place there when I was competing as an All-American wrestler that allows you, that gives you that feedback loop, right? You have coaches around you, you have teammates, and you're seeing them fail and succeed, of course. And you're getting feedback. You're in this environment that even if you fail, you're still propelled forward. There's still a competition next weekend.
Yeah,
there's still the postseason coming up at the end of the season. Like there's still this map in front of you. You still have to show up at practice the next day. So there's this framework that allows you to not just fail in a vacuum, but fail within a framework, within an infrastructure that allows you to be resilient, because failure is hard, but also to learn from it and get better from it. And this framework is really something that I didn't understand it when I was going through it. And, I showed up at the University of Virginia as an underperformer, and, didn't feel like I belonged there academically. It's the number one public academic university in the country. I didn't have the grades. I had good grades, but not UVA good grades. Wrestling wise, again, I told you, I was good. I was not like UVA good, but wrestling did open the door for me to get in. Yeah. And I showed up there, and I'm a blue collar kid from a small town. So this is an affluent school. So I'm like so out of my element. And you're from Virginia. You've lived in Virginia before. You're probably familiar with UVA. It's like, it's just a different kind of school. What? Sorry. Yeah. You went there. Of course. Yeah. That's right. You mentioned you went there. And so you're familiar. And I just didn't fit in. But 5 years later, I graduate with an undergraduate and master's degree. I'm a 3-time ACC
Amazing.
champion. I'm an All-American. I had
Wonderful.
the world by the tail. This is like I transformed through this experience, and then that set me off onto a life of Division I. I was the Division I head coach. I was the youngest Division I head coach in the country. I got into business, and I started my first business, and that was successful. And I started my second business, raised some angel capital, and built a technology company that failed. And I ended up with, debt up to my eyeballs, failed business, struggling marriage, not spending enough time with my kids, wasn't working out enough. I was in the worst physical shape of my life. I was broken.
Interesting.
But as I was shutting down that business, I looked back and I realized there was a framework in place that allowed me to benefit, go back to that Tim Ferriss episode, to not just fail in a vacuum, but actually to learn from the failure. And the 4 steps very quickly because I know we're sort of ending our time here. Number one, you have to have a clear vision for your life that's based upon your values. And it's easy to have that when you're a competitive athlete, but in the real world, it's so often nebulous. Like, what is my goal? What does success look like for me? You have to define that. And number two, I had goals that aligned with my values, not goals that aligned with what I see on social media or what's parked in my neighbor's driveway. And you have to have those in every area of your life. And then number three is I had an environment of excellence, right? I had coaches and teammates and these people around me that pushed me forward, that helped me learn from failure and helped me be resilient and helped me have clear goals. And then fourth and finally, you have to have a plan to actually follow through in the long term, because that is often what throws people off. They get sick or cars break down or their global pandemic happens and they fall off the path.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, those four, the framework, those 4 steps, they're really doable. I think it's really good to compartmentalize that, to be able to walk every aspect of that out. Because as you said, without a framework, I mean, you're just simply going to spin your wheels and then repeat the same struggle over and over again. Unfortunately, our time is up. If my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you, to hear your podcast, to work with you, where will they find all this information online?
Yep. You can find me on any social media platform. Just search for Jim Harshaw, Harshaw. Or if you go to my website, you go to jimharshawjr, JR, for junior.com/lifeology. Then I will have a link especially for your listeners, James, and you can find a time to schedule a call with me if you want to do a 30-minute one-on-one call, and I can walk you through this process a little more in depth in terms of how it will work out in your own life. Or if you just want to find links to the podcast and get action plans, listen to the podcast or get the PDF downloads of the show notes, I'll have all that there. jimharshawjr.com/lifeology.
Awesome. Well, my viewers and listeners also know that if they can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com and I'll look Jim Harshaw Jr. Thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on the show today.
Thanks, James.